What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. We continue with our 2025 college football schedule preview and very early projected record series. The Texas A&M Aggies are up next. Before we look ahead to 2025, let's take a look back at what Texas A&M did in 2024. Here are my projections and predictions last year for Texas A&M. My projection for this team was at 6-6, and then my prediction for them was 8-4, and I was exactly right on the money here for Texas A&M with their overall prediction. This team ended up going 8-4, but I was 2 games off of their projection because I didn't really know how good Texas A&M was going to be with a first-year head coach, but Mike Elko came in there and did an impressive job for this Texas A&M team right away. But their overall record last year, if you count their bowl game loss, they went 8-5. So maybe kind of a disappointing finish to the season because they did lose some games down the stretch that were really tough for them. But I think it was a pretty solid first season for Mike Elko and this team. Looking at the schedule from last season in 2024, first off, you look at who they played in the non-conference. They, of course, had to play Notre Dame, which is not really a Power 4 team, but this is a very talented team and a really good program. And, of course, Notre Dame went all the way to the national championship. Lost to Ohio State, but this was a huge game to kick off the season and definitely like a big game for the Mike Elko era to start off with as well. But, yeah, Texas A&M lost that game by 10, and they also played McNeese, Bowling Green, and New Mexico State. So not a tough non-conference schedule except for that Notre Dame game. Then they got on a winning streak. You look at their home schedule in the SEC, they had that one neutral site game against Arkansas. It's not really counted as a home game, but also like an away game as well. But that's going to change a lot this year because Arkansas and Texas A&M are going back to a home and away situation, but their true home games were against Missouri. They also played LSU and then Texas all at home. So they beat Missouri and also LSU, but they lost to Texas at home. They lost that game by 10 as well. So they lost to Notre Dame by 10 and also Texas at the end of the year by 10 as well. Those were very tough opponents for Texas A&M. Then you look at the road schedule. They played at Florida, at Mississippi State, at South Carolina, and at Auburn. So they lost to South Carolina and Auburn both on the road. South Carolina ended up being a blowout, and then, of course, Auburn. That game went into a lot of overtimes last year. That was a pretty good game last season, probably the game of the year in the SEC in my opinion. So that was a schedule from last year for 2024 for the Aggies. Let's now go into the 2025. This is their schedule coming up for the 2025 season. Before we go game by game, let's take a look at who the Aggies play in the non-conference for this season. So you look at their non-conference schedule, they will play UTSA, Utah State, at Notre Dame, and then also Samford out of the FCS. So they will play 3 cupcake games. It's pretty similar to last year. They play 3 cupcake games, and then you got the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame once again, but this time they will play them on the road, and they don't play that game until week 3. So you get a couple of cupcake games right there to start the season, and then by week 3 you have to go on the road to face Notre Dame, which honestly Notre Dame might not be as good as they were last year. It could be a different story in this game this time than it was from last season, but you know, Notre Dame is still a very talented team. They're definitely the more better team than Texas A&M, but I think Texas A&M might be a little bit better this time this year in 2025. But yeah, the non-conference schedule, pretty similar to last year, 3 cupcakes, and then you got, of course, Notre Dame on the road this time, though, in the non-conference. So that's your non-conference schedule. Let's now move on to the home SEC schedule for the Aggies. They will play 4 home games in the SEC. They'll play Auburn, Mississippi State, Florida, and South Carolina. So not a bad home schedule. You got Auburn and South Carolina, 2 teams that you lost to on the road last year. This time you get those 2 opponents at home. So those will be a couple of revenge games there for the Aggies. I think Florida's going to be a very competitive game. You know, Florida seems like they're heading in the right direction again. They got a really good quarterback of the future. Last year's game obviously was not really close. Yeah, Florida's definitely going to be ready for this one this time. And then you got Mississippi State, the worst team in the SEC from last year. So not a bad home schedule. Then we look at the away schedule in the SEC. They'll play 4 away games in this conference. They'll play on the road at Arkansas, at LSU, at Missouri, and then on the road at Texas. So this is a pretty tough road schedule. You got Arkansas and Missouri, which are kind of like trap games for the Aggies, but those are very winnable games here for Texas A&M that really two games that could come down to the wire, to be honest, that could be competitive. And then you got LSU, of course, in Death Valley, and then you go on the road to Austin to play rival Texas. Obviously, that rivalry got renewed from last year after Texas joined the SEC. Looking forward to that game, but this is a pretty tough road schedule for Texas A&M in my opinion. So that is the away schedule. Let's go back to the schedule now and go game by game now for the Aggies. Again, they start things off with UTSA on August 30th. Then you got Utah State on September 6th. So like I said, a couple of cupcake games, and then there's that big game in the non-conference on the road at Notre Dame on September 13th. Like I said, they played them last year at home, but this time they will play the Fighting Irish on the road this time. And instead of week 1, they're playing in week 3. So that game will be on September 13th. Then they get a bye week here before opening up SEC play against Auburn at home on September 27th. Then you got Mississippi State on October the 4th at home as well. Then you also play Florida at home on October 11th. So how about that from stretch, the stretch there from September 27th to October the 11th. They'll play 3 home games in a row in the SEC. And then it's going to be the opposite again. They'll play at Arkansas, their first true road game against the SEC. They'll play them on October 18th. Then it's at LSU on October 25th. And then how about this? They get a bye week here before playing Missouri, also on the road. So you look at that stretch from October 18th to November 8th, they'll play 3 road games in a row. So this schedule is kind of weird, to be honest. They play 3 straight home games, and then they play 3 straight away games in the SEC. Yeah, that's going to be pretty tough of a stretch there, especially playing on the road and back-to-back weeks at Arkansas and LSU. But you get a bye week at least before playing Missouri, which I think is good news. They'll play the Tigers there on November 8th at Missouri. Then they play South Carolina at home on November 15th. Then they play Samford on November 22nd, and then you close things out with Texas on the road on November 29th. So a pretty tough schedule for Texas A&M. You got Notre Dame, of course, in the non-conference, and then you got a couple of tough road games with LSU and Texas in the SEC, but definitely some trap games on here, especially some at home as well. So let's now get at the projection here for Texas A&M. This is the scale I'll be using here for their projection. If it's a 1% game in the red, again, that's pretty much counted as an automatic loss in that percentage, and then your 20% games in the orange will be games where Texas A&M will be about a double-digit underdog. 40% games in the yellow, they'll be a clear underdog in those games by 6 or 7 points, and then your 50-50 games will stay in the white, games that really could go either way. 60% games in the purple, those are games where Texas A&M should be favored by about a touchdown, 6 or 7 points, and then your 80% games in the blue, those are counted as wins, but they're not really counted as guaranteed wins, just like maybe the green games are. None of these games are guaranteed wins, but the blue games count as wins as well, and they'll be favored by double digits in that percentage, and then your 99% games in the green, those are pretty much your easy wins. So we'll start with the easy wins here for Texas A&M. I think you got 3 easy wins: UTSA, Utah State, and Samford. So I think all 3 of these games, Texas A&M should be able to take care of business. There's absolutely no reason for them to lose all 3 of these games. So the 3 out of the 4 non-conference games, they should be favored here by 20-plus points. I don't really see any of these games on here that, jump out to me to be like at 17, point spread. I think all these games should be at least over 20-plus points. And I think Texas A&M should be able to take care of business. So, yeah, UTSA, Utah State, Samford, I think all these games are pretty much counted as wins, not guaranteed wins, but we count them as wins in this projection. Then we go on to the blue games. I actually have one game here in the blue, and that's against an SEC team, and that's Mississippi State at home on October the 4th. I think Texas A&M will be favored against Mississippi State by double digits. It's not going to be a big spread there, just like the green games are, but it's somewhere between like 10 to 14 points. They'll be favored by at least a double digits, and then also by a couple of touchdowns. Let's just put it that way. So yeah, Mississippi State was not really good last year. Texas A&M is definitely the better team. I get it. You can make an argument it should probably be in the green, but I'm going to stick with it here and put it in the blue for right now, just in case. And then I have one game in the purple as well. And that's going to be Auburn here on September 27th. I think Texas A&M will be favored against the Tigers of Auburn by 6 or 7 points. Look, I know Auburn beat Texas A&M last year, in that overtime game, that overtime madness and everything, but I got to put this game in the purple because Texas A&M is playing at home. Auburn is a tier below Texas A&M in my opinion. I know Auburn, like I said, they beat Texas A&M last year, but that game, of course, was at home. And Auburn did not even make it to a bowl game. They're coming off a disappointing season, so I think Texas A&M might be the better team as of right now. But you never know. This game could probably come down to the wire just like it did from last year. You know, it seems like when these two teams play each other in the SEC, it's going to be out of control, and it's also going to be a game that just really comes down to the wire. So I'm only going to favor the Aggies here by 6 or 7 points. Again, not a big spread here, by about a touchdown at least by 6 or 7 points. And then we go to the games where I think Texas A&M is going to be an underdog in. I do have a couple of games in the yellow. I don't have any games in the red or orange, but I have a couple of games in the yellow, and those two games are Notre Dame and Texas. So both of these games are on the road. I think Texas A&M will be clear underdogs in both of them. Notre Dame last year beat Texas A&M by 10 points. That's the reason why this game is in the yellow. And Notre Dame is kind of a tier above Texas A&M, and same thing with Texas. Now, if you go back to my Texas projection, I meant to change it to a purple game for the Longhorns, and I also meant to change my projected record for Texas at 11-1. So I wasn't looking at the tier system right. I get it. It's a rivalry game. I said that back then, but now when I look at this game, because it's on the road, Texas A&M will be a clear underdog in this game. So I think they'll be a clear underdog in both of those games by 6 or 7 points. Not a big spread there, but it does give them a chance, to probably win one of these two games and probably pull off an upset. You never know. So yeah, these two games, I think Texas A&M will be 6 or 7 point underdogs against Notre Dame and Texas, both on the road. And then that leaves you with 5 50-50 games: Florida, Arkansas, LSU, Missouri, and South Carolina. These are all games that really can go either way. I know Florida probably should be in the purple as well, but Florida finished the season pretty strong last year, and I think this is going to be a really competitive game. South Carolina, obviously a lot of hype coming up in 2025, and then these road games are just really tough to predict right now for Texas A&M. They really, all three can go either way. That's a really tough stretch there as well, from October 18th to November 8th, playing 3 road games in a row against Arkansas, LSU, and Missouri. So what does the projected record come out to be here for Texas A&M based on how tough this schedule is? We count the 3 green games as wins, and then you count that 1 blue game as a win as well. Then you average out that 1 purple game at 60%, then average out the yellow games at 40%, and then you average out all these 50-50 games at 50%. Let's say they split these 50-50 games. Let's say they win at least 2 out of the 5, and then they probably lose. They may actually probably win, maybe they probably can win at least 3 out of these 50-50 games, or maybe they can probably, lose one of these yellow games, and then also they can probably win it. Well, if you count the green games as wins and the blue games as wins, that's going to give you probably a total of 7 or 8 wins, but that's how it came out to be. It was 8 wins here for Texas A&M based on the 50-50 games and then also the yellow games. But like I said, if they probably split these 50-50 games, let's say they win 3 out of the 5, and then they probably maybe slip up against Auburn. You never know, they can probably slip up against Auburn. They probably only can win they could probably just go 3 out of the 6 in the 50-50 games, or maybe 2 out of the 6, or 2 out of the 5 50-50 games. And let's say they probably win one of those yellow games. Let's just put it that way. Let's say they win 2 out of the 5 50-50 games, and then they probably pull off one of these upsets in the yellow. That'll give them a total of 8 wins. So that is what the projected record came out to be. It's 8-4 here for Texas A&M. This is a tough schedule in my opinion. I think best case scenario is probably 9-3. Worst case probably 7-5. But either way, the projected record is 8-4 based on how tough this schedule is for Texas A&M. Do you guys agree or disagree? Let me know down in the comments below, and also give me your thoughts about Texas A&M's schedule down in the comments below. Is it tough or not so tough? Thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports YouTube channel.